Greetings everyone and welcome to another episode of Fanfic Read Through. I am Tobacco94 and I'm reading my own fanfic for all of you who prefer to listen rather than read, or sometimes have other things to do. I hope you're all still enjoying this. There's a lot of more stories from where this came from. You can find the rest of my work over at Archive Our Own. My name is the same there, Tsubaki94. As well as if you want to read ahead or want to know what I changed and what doesn't come into the story when I'm reading it. Because there's some things that I actually delete. This was bad. This was really bad when I wrote it. Trust me, you don't want to see the first draft. It was horrible. With that said, please enjoy. Hell's Trip, Chapter 11 to 12. Danny had odd sensation. Opening his eyes, he could only see a blur of colors and light. Lifting his hand to rub at his eye, he found something plastic in his way. Trying to swallow, he found it impossible. His eyes widened in realization as his hand moved over the tube sticking out of his mouth and going down his throat. Shh, a soft female voice said beside him. Turning his eyes towards the speaker, he saw a blurred figure dressed in white with short-cut ginger hair, leaning forward and taking Danny's hand away from his face. The tube is helping you breathe for now. However scared you are right now, don't fight, okay? She smiled and pushed his fingers out of his face. Blinking, Danny tried to get his eyes to focus. He felt the woman let go of his hand and saw her turn around. Lifting his hands to his face, he rubbed his eyes and blinked at the person, or rather, at the spot the person had just been in. The woman was gone. Or maybe she had just gone out of sight. Looking around, Danny's mood darkened. He was once again in an emergency room. His t-shirt had been taken off him and was most likely no longer in one piece. There were electrodes attached to his chest, with wires going to a monitor that let out a beep every time his heart beat, and an IV was attached to his left hand, hanging some kind of transparent fluid from a bag above his head. Someone had drawn a curtain around his bed, but he could still see the bed to his right, where a man sat, the pants of his right leg gone, and a cast over it. There were people speaking on the other side of the curtains. Then he could identify Sam's voice and Mr. Lancer's. They were apparently talking to a woman doctor, or a nurse, but not the same one that had spoken to Danny moments before. Slowly, Danny propped himself up on his elbows. The tube in his throat was uncomfortable. Listening, he could hear what was being said. It depends on how long he was without air. There could be some damage, or there could be no damage at all. The woman sighed deeply. This is a bit of a guessing game, to be honest. He could wake up at any moment now, or he might never wake up. And here I thought I was the goth, getting everyone around me depressed, said Sam in a sarcastic tone. Miss Manson, you are not helping, said Mr. Lancer, and then he could imagine the look he gave her. What we can do for now is wait. The results from the blood test will come back soon, and we will monitor him closely, the woman continued. It would be best if his parents or guardian could come here as soon as possible. That would be a bit hard, seeing as I can't get a hold of the Fentons, said Mr. Lancer, but before he could say anything else, Sam spoke. Jazz is on her way. It might take her an hour to get here. Danny's heart skipped a beat when a woman mentioned blood test, and was in the middle of racing off when Sam mentioned his sister. Maybe Jazz could help. But then again, she was better suited to create distractions, or explain away mysterious injuries and abscesses. Before they could say anything more, the voice of the man Danny loved the most cut in. More like 15 minutes, I believe, said Vlad Master. Danny cringed at the sound of his voice. Whoever decided to call the Fruit Loop must have been out of his mind, he thought. May Master, said Mr. Lancer in surprise. What brings you here? I was close by when Jasmine called. She said something happened to Danny. Is he all right? Asked Vlad, all innocent and concern, which only made Danny want to puke. We don't know yet, Mr. Lancer began, but was cut off by Sam. He is fine, she said, more heat in her voice than Danny had heard before. So you can just turn around and wait in the waiting room like everyone else. There's no reason for you to be here. Really, Samantha, I'm only here because I have the boy's best interests at heart, and his parents made me his guardian in case they or his sister couldn't be reached, he added offhand. Danny's heart stopped in his throat. His parents had given his arch-enemy guardianship over him? Vlad had evidently some kind of paper confirming this, because there was a silence before the woman spoke. "Well, looks like everything is in order." "I can't believe this!" exclaimed Sam, but before she could say anything more, Mr. Lancer cut her off. "Miss Manson, come with me," he said in a hard tone of voice, followed by the sound of Sam grumbling in a pair of heavy combat boots, walking away. "If it's not a bother, may I see the boy?" asked Vlad in a concerned fatherly voice that Danny had heard him use when talking to his cousin before trying to melt her down into a puddle of ectoplasm. "Yes, this way. He's still unconscious, and we had to intubate him when he stopped breathing." The curtains was pulled to the side, revealing the rest of the emergency room, a smug-looking Vlad and a surprised brown-haired woman in a white coat and scrubs. "Daniel, you are awake!" she exclaimed, and her eyes went from Danny to his heart monitor. Danny rolled his eyes and glared at Vlad. "May I have a word alone with Danny?" asked Vlad, turning to the woman. She had walked up to Danny and adjusted the bed so that he didn't have to lean on his elbows and could sit up relatively comfortably. "Yes, just give me a second," she said, placing a hand on Danny's chin and turning his face towards her. "Can you look here for a second?" she asked, and Danny took his eyes away from Vlad to look the woman in the eyes. "Good," she said, and Danny caught a glimpse of a name tag on her lab coat. M. Smith. "Now you have a tube in your throat that is helping you breathe. Do you understand?" She was digging in her front pocket. Nodding very slightly, Danny saw her bring out a pen light. "You're at Limestone General. You've had a severe anaphylactic reaction to a flower. Do you remember?" Danny nodded and turned his eyes to Vlad again. "We've given you medicine to help you breathe and counteract the allergic reaction, but we want to keep the tube in for a bit longer. I know it's scary and uncomfortable, but you need to understand, it's for your own good." He nodded again. She turned to Vlad. "You can talk to him for a moment. Just make sure he keeps calm." Vlad smiled. "Oh, I will. Could we have some privacy, please?" Then he glared daggers at the man. Getting up, M. Smith drew the curtains close around them. "Now then, Daniel." Danny's eyes glowed green, and the lights appeared around him, splitting. Ah! Vlad drew out what looked like a stun gun and pushed it against Danny's naked stomach. Pain fled up throughout his body, and the rings of light disappeared in a flicker. His muscles cramped. Taking the Plasmius Maximus away, Vlad pocketed it and waited for Danny to catch his breath, something really hard to do with a machine breathing for him. He had to relax and give in to the machine. Glaring at Vlad, Danny rubbed at the 2 small red spots left by the device. "Trust me, Danny, that was for your own good," said Vlad in a low tone. Danny kept glaring at him. Crossing his arms over his chest, Vlad looked Danny over, noticing the still red and puffy scar on his abdomen, as well as the old ones, and stopping at the small scrapes that the thorny bush left on him. Vlad sighed. "You have 2 options," he began, meeting Danny's glare. "One is to let the doctors take care of you, and hope that they don't kill you in the process. Or you can accept my help." Danny raised a skeptical eyebrow. "You're wondering why you should trust me," said Vlad, reading Danny's facial expressions. "That is a good question. Let me explain why you can't afford not to trust me." He leaned in closer. "Your body might be able to get rid of the flower's poison in 2 to 3 weeks. In that time, however, you will be at constant risk of another anaphylactic reaction. If you transform before your body has gotten rid of it, your lungs will feel like they are on fire. Your heart will beat so fast that it would feel like it's going to burst out of your chest. Your throat will feel like sandpaper, and it will feel like someone is stabbing your guts out, at the same time as your muscles will be too weak to move, and your head will be too heavy to think." Danny swallowed hard. The image Vlad painted was agony, and he was pretty sure that Vlad was sugarcoating it as well. He raised an eyebrow and gave Vlad a look, telling him to get to the point. From his pocket, Vlad took out a brown glass bottle with some kind of liquid in it. "This will purge the poison from your body in, 2 to 3 days. Then he gave Vlad a raised eyebrow. "Yes, there is a catch. It causes a high fever, and you might get a cough as well, and there is the normal risk of nightmares and fever hallucinations, but nothing dangerous." Vlad picked up a syringe, still in his package, from his suit jacket. Then he tried to crawl away. At the sight of Danny's reaction, Vlad smiled. "Don't worry, Daniel," he said, taking the syringe out of its package and measured some of the milky white liquid from the bottle into it. "I will just show you that this does not contain any poison," he said, putting down the bottle and rolling up his left sleeve. He placed the needle against the skin before piercing it and injecting the liquid into himself. Danny gave him a look as if asking if he was insane, but Vlad only smiled, taking the syringe from his arm, leaving only a red dot where he just injected himself. "See? No poison. It will only react to blood blossom." He took out a new syringe and opened it, too. "Now, what is your decision, Danny? Do you want to suffer for 2 to 3 weeks, or just 2 to 3 days? He filled the new syringe and looked at Danny with a smile, tapping it, making sure that there were no air in it. It was hard to snarl with a tube in his mouth, but Danny managed to do it, giving Vlad his left arm. Placing the needle against the underside of Danny's arm, Vlad looked into the boy's eyes as he pierced the skin. There was no reaction from Danny. He hadn't even flinched, like everyone else would have. Closing his eyes, Danny waited for Vlad to be done, counting backwards down from 100. Feeling the needle withdraw from his arm, Danny opened his eyes again to look up at Vlad. The old half-ghost was throwing away both syringes and putting back the glass bottle in his pocket. "Now, that wasn't so bad, was it?" he said, a smug smile on his face. Danny gave him the finger. "Okay, Mr. Master, I can't give you more private time than this," M. Smith said, drawing back the curtains. In that moment, Danny had an idea that would be reckless, but also get Vlad into trouble. "What are you doing?" M. Smith shouted, dropping the chart she'd been holding, to run over to Danny's side. Danny had gripped the tube sticking out of his mouth and made to pull it out, when Vlad and his supernatural reflexes had gripped his arms, stopping him. "Don't do it, boy," Vlad growled at Danny as the woman tried to pry Danny's arms away from the tube. M. Smith found that it was impossible to move Danny's fingers and called for help. Hadn't Vlad and Danny both been supernaturally strong, Danny would have succeeded in pulling the annoying tube out instead of being stuck in an arm lock. Peeling back his lips, Danny showed his sharp teeth on the tube, threatening to bite it off. "Don't!" growled Vlad. Danny tried his teeth on the tube, and Vlad's face turned into a grimace as he released Danny. "Insufferable child!" he snarled. As soon as Danny's arms were free, Danny bent forward, pulling out the tube, feeling like he was going to throw up again as he did. "No, no, no, no," M. Smith said, hurrying to place a hand on Danny's back as he coughed. "Insufferable old man," croaked Danny, feeling like his lungs were trying to throw themselves up his throat. Vlad was about to say something in response when a woman interrupted him. "Mr. Master, I will have to ask you to leave. You can wait in the waiting area." Vlad glared down at Danny, who smiled despite himself. The plan had worked. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. "That was stupid," Dr. Maria Smith scolded Danny. She had hooked a nasal oxygen canal behind Danny's ears as he was coughing. "Didn't I tell you the tube was helping you breathe?" "It was keeping me from speaking," answered Danny, drawing in air through his nose. His throat felt raw and tight, but unlike before, he could feel his lungs. He licked his cut lip and tasted blood. Dr. Smith put her stethoscope in her ears and placed the other end against Danny's chest and back. "Well, you're still breathing," she said, taking the stethoscope out of her ears and putting it back around her neck. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone tried to strangle me," replied Danny, taking deep breaths, having never really appreciated how great a feeling it was to breathe. "That is generally the reaction," said Dr. Smith, shining her penlight in Danny's eyes. "I don't have a concussion, if that's what you're looking for," said Danny, closing his eyes and leaning back against the bed. "I'm looking for brain damage," said Dr. Smith, putting away her penlight. "And seeing as you can talk now, mind answering my questions? Like for starters, why you pulled the tube out?" she asked, an angry note in her voice. "Uncomfortable, couldn't talk, couldn't move my neck, hard to swallow. Take your pick," was Danny's answer. "That is normal," sighed Smith, and picked up the chart she dropped. "Are you in any pain?" Danny had to think about the question for a moment. He'd almost forgotten about the beating he'd gotten before being thrown into the bush of blood blossom. Looking down on himself, he could see bruises forming on his chest where Dash had hit him, that was more uncomfortable than painful. Licking his lip again, he could feel it sting, and it was definitely bruises forming on his face as well. But other than an ache in his right leg, he felt like normal. "Throat sore," he said, voice raspy. Shaking her head, Dr. Smith wrote on the chart. She continued to ask Danny questions and filled out the chart for a couple of more moments before putting down her pen and looked up at Danny. "Is there anything else we need to know?" Danny shrugged and saw the door to the emergency room open to reveal Sam, still dressed in her red overalls. She pulled down the top of it and tied it around her waist. "I'd rather not be here at all," said Danny, and smiled at his friend when she saw him. "You are the worst friend anyone can have," said Sam, walking up to him. Even if her words were hard, her tone said that she didn't mean it. "You almost gave me a heart attack when you stopped breathing," she went on, coming up on Danny's right. "Don't ever do that again," she finished off by punching Danny on his right thigh, making him jerk and double over in pain. "It's nice to see you too," he rasped, straightening. "Please refrain from punching my patients," said Dr. Smith. "I'll be back in a moment to check on you." She left, walking over to the nurse's station beside the door Sam had just come through. "No, but seriously, Danny, you scared us," said Sam in a lower tone, jumping up to sit at the foot of his bed. Valerie said something about blood blossom, but she didn't know what happened before that. Danny scratched the back of his head and then told Sam about the fight with Dash, how he'd been thrown into the bush and realized what it was, and then how he'd woken up and how the others had come to the base, omitting only the part about a tunnel that ended in a bright light, putting it down to lack of air rather than the light at the end of that tunnel. "I can't believe you did that. You know he's in the waiting room right now. I think you scared him," said Sam when Dan had finished. "Well, if I died, he would have been a murderer. Could ruin his football career," said Danny with a smile, earning himself an elbow in the side from Sam. "Don't joke about things like that," she said and lowered her voice. "However much I like death and darkness, I'd rather not be friends with a ghost." "Sorry to break it to you, but you already are," joked Danny and got a slap on the head. "I'm going to raid the vending machine for something eatable," she said, getting up. "And here's your phone. Do me a favor and call your sister before she crashes her car." Sam got the phone out of her pocket and tossed it to Danny, who caught it. Walking out of the emergency room, Sam walked over to a vending machine in the hall and glared at it and all its content. She should have felt relief seeing Danny awake. She should have been happy, but she wasn't. She'd been relieved when Vlad told them that Danny was awake and had ignored Mr. Lancer's orders to stay in the waiting room and gone to see him. But when she'd seen him, she'd felt angry. The smile he'd given her felt like another lie, just like the story about fighting Dash had felt like a lie. She kicked the vending machine without much force behind it. It had been the same feeling she'd gotten 2 weeks earlier when Danny hadn't shown up for math and they had found out that he'd been in a fight with Dash and sent the football star to the hospital. She and Tucker had come over to visit Danny after school, and he had looked like he'd been in a fight when he opened the door, just like he did now. The right side of his face was all bruised, and his lip was split. And just like now, when he told them what had happened, she'd felt like he was lying. Putting her head against the cool glass of the vending machine, she kicked it again. What had changed, she wondered. It wasn't that he hadn't kept secrets before. He'd always had secrets, but he'd always been honest when keeping things from his friends. Like the thing with the Ripper ghost. She and Tucker had asked Danny what had been going on in his head when the ghost took over him, and Danny had shuddered and told them that he'd rather not think about it. They knew that there had been more to the whole thing, but they'd respect Danny's wishes to not talk about it. Kicking the machine harder, a bag of chips got loose and fell down. Maybe it wasn't something wrong with Danny. Maybe it was something wrong with her. She glared at the bag of chips, as if it had said something offending. No, the only thing wrong with her was that she was beating up a vending machine and obsessing over a guy that was much more than a friend to her. She bent down and picked up the bag of chips, forcing herself to think about anything else than Danny. Like why they needed animal fats in normal potato chips. It completely ruined the eatability of the snack and deserved to be ranted about on ultrarecycleveggie.net. She walked back into the waiting room and sat down beside the teacher. Danny stared after Sam as she walked out, wondering what had gotten into her, and then turned to the screen of his phone. A message was waiting for him, from BB Girl. Curiously, because he was 100% sure he had never added someone with a name like that, he opened the message. "Hi, are you alright? / Garcia," said the message. Raising an eyebrow, Danny typed back. End of chapter 12.